All right, thank you, Toby, and thank you everyone for joining us on an SDxCentral webinar featuring Versa Networks. One of the key things that we're seeing today with the rollout of SD-WAN is the ability of SD-WAN to provide even more security capabilities across enterprises. And as we know, enterprises today are looking at a shift in their infrastructure to one that's sort of traditional, based around sort of legacy appliances, to one that's software defined across multiple clouds and so on. And with all the attacks that are happening on enterprises today, it certainly is important to figure out how to deal with all these attacks and within the context of SD-WAN, having visibility and policy context in an integrated platform is certainly a part of it. So today's webinar, joining me, we have two experts in the field. We have Robert McBride and Atchison Fraser, both from Versa Networks. And in terms of the applicability of today's content, regardless of whether you're in infrastructure, overall cloud infrastructure, or networking, and whether you are on the technical side in terms of, sort of just pure architecture, or you're looking at it from a business and technology standpoint, if you're a CIO or director of IT, certainly today's content will be helpful to you. And what we'll learn today, as Robert and Atchison get underway here, will be how contextually SD-WANs, can be accretive to your overall security posture. How you might have the ability to actually drive down the total cost of ownership, moving away from a legacy sort of multi-vendor, edge device platform that you may have today, and how you can benefit from simplification at the branch office with a zero-touch perimeter orchestration solution. And so with that, actually, let me turn it over to Robert. Rob?
Thanks, Roy. Hello, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and kick off our presentation here. So as Roy was giving the outline, our goal today is to have you understand the importance of security plus SD-WAN, and then obviously within the definition, if you will, as far as it relates to providing contextual awareness as well as the visibility to the overall WAN Edge architecture. And so with that, as we move forward, I wanted to first kind of go through where we're at today and then lead into, as it relates to a Versa architecture to deliver a secure cloud IP, and then obviously with the contextual capabilities that enterprise IT operators should be looking at to help improve their overall security posture as well as operations. So when we look at the legacy WAN or today's architecture, that's a non-SD-WAN oriented solution. I think we're very much familiar with this kind of graphic, right? You look at a legacy architecture where there's a private access from the branch going into a centralized location, whether at HQ or data center, that provides that centralized internet-based access. As of course, as we've, as we all know, are very much familiar with, even very much on this application we're using to communicate with you, right? And now a lot of the apps are very much more real-time, more bandwidth intensive, of course, and we're having a little bit of a mix between cloud delivered and some that are business or non-business oriented. And of course, all of these are located in the cloud. And as you look at a traditional architecture and how those services are accessed, in a non-new WAN Edge deployment or solution that might be software defined, these services are competing. There's a level of a trombone effect actually occurring going through the headquarters, everything squeezing through a common point of access that may not have enough bandwidth in order to service these new applications that are actually occurring at the branch. And so obviously, of course, that results in poor productivity as well as a poor user experience for those that are either remote or just in generally across the business. So as you kind of keep drilling and digging down and double clicking into the overall traditional architecture that we've seen, as you see here, we have a Dollar General store as our example, of course, our cloud services, centralized access through a data center or a hub. And here we do have, in an attempt to solve the bandwidth issue, a multi-transport strategy at this particular branch. However, this might not be running both business critical services across the non-MPLS transport. But as we know, MPLS is, of course, if we wanted to increase that, it's not giving us our best cost per bit. The real thing to look at from a traditional architecture is that when we look at the overall complexity that's been where we're at today in the branch, there actually is a level of hardware appliance sprawl to address either wireless connectivity, separate architecture to address business or non-business critical services, most namely guest services, routers, and secure web gateways, even potentially WAN optimizations. Appliances. And when you look at that level of complexity makes things a little bit too difficult to manage. And as we look at what happens from an operations and control perspective, there's a little bit of a lack of agility because there's no central control. As you can see here, as we're representing, there's basically screens for every single function. And change control can actually be very, very lengthy. Moving forward, now, of course, SD-WAN comes into the mix to help address and provide a level of, sorry there, my audio might be a little off. So when we look at how to change this and what's actually kicking off in the industry right now to address this, SD-WAN, of course, has been a technology that's now being deployed and adopted across multiple different markets as well as industries. And the idea, of course, with SD-WAN is to deliver a level of cost control. One of the main pain points to address is for those real-time applications and services with access to the cloud, capacity or bandwidth capacity at the branch was a need. And to be able to do that very cost effectively while also helping to simplify at least transport management was one of the main value adds that SD-WAN, of course, brings to the table. But when you look at it from a vanilla perspective, which is really just about WAN transport management with levels of application intelligence to get to cloud, it really doesn't, the only thing it does, it really only helps us address cost, because now we can augment, sorry guys, a little bit of operator error here, moving slides. The branch now is able to be able to augment MPLS connectivity and obviously increase capacity with internet. However, a level of sprawl is not actually being addressed here as we kind of move forward here now. And what we mean by that, with a vanilla SD-WAN, you're still adding an appliance that would be focused on SD-WAN, but of course, as we've noticed, the internet connection that's being added to the branch locations, there's a need to actually have a distributed security strategy. And within that, of course, that actually adds to the appliance role in some cases, depending on branch size and various different solutions, where an additional appliance is actually being deployed at the branch location. We did a survey, actually, I think in the beginning of this year, to kind of give some figures to the audience here, is that there is, in a majority of enterprise deployments, there is roughly around 60% of our respondents of enterprise businesses of 1,000 employees or more actually didn't have any local on-premise based security at the branch. And so with that, of course, as they move to having direct internet access, they need to provide a level of perimeter security for those locations. And some strategies, of course, are around deploying an appliance or a security function on premise. In the current way that we've been deploying various functions and services, this of course adds to the overall appliance sprawl, whether it's a hardware footprint or a virtual footprint. As we kind of move forward here, we want to take a quick pause here to kind of talk about where we're transitioning into. So we've laid a little bit of the groundwork as far as some of the previous problems with traditional legacy, adding new transport, security implications that relates to direct internet access. But obviously, of course, we look at today's hardware model, and this is what we've been deploying, where appliances are very point functions. So we may have a router. That router has its own management structure. We have a firewall, and so on and so forth. And what we're representing here is that, on average, what we found in our surveys is that it's roughly between 6 to 10 appliances per branch. whether that's with HA or non-HA. And so there is a level of sprawl occurring. Each of those have a separate management screen that we're representing here. Of course, we're all should be or are a little bit familiar with the concept, of course, of NFV and virtualizing the various different functions on top of a common hardware platform. But there's still some levels of complexity here. Instead of a hardware sprawl, you end up having a virtual sprawl, where in most cases, in certain solutions, those individual functions still have a separate management screen or a separate interface that enterprise IT or even managed operators now have to interface with in order to manage change and control, enact policies, or implement new services. The model that we have adopted and we actually have brought to market to be identified as our software-defined model, of course, is about integrating as many of those possible functions into a common software platform in order to simplify the manner in how you interface with all the services. And as we represent here, that's done through a single screen. And I'll get into a little bit more detail as far as what our components are in order to address and deliver this. The natural transition that we have in evolution is moving from basically a hardware-driven strategy, moving into a first step virtualized strategy, but still each of the individual services and functions have separate entities to manage, control, and operate. However, they've been virtualized, thus reducing physical footprint. And then the next transition, what we've been innovating and bringing to market on is taking all of those and virtualizing them as a single cloud native software platform that provides a multitude of network as well as security services.
Yeah, Robert, it's Atchison. I'll just punch up as well the multi-tenancy capability there, both for an operator and an enterprise. It's true multi-tenancy. It's multi-tenancy everywhere, and it allows you to have thousands of nodes, whether they're on-premise, virtualized, or a cloud instance within that one tenant, or as the enterprise do-it-yourself, the ability to segment the network, leveraging that multi-tenancy capability is a significant security maneuver as we'll see as you get through the architecture.
And to land on the architecture Athens is referring to here is, if we were to look at other potential approaches to software defining the WAN edge or even the cloud edge in a multi-service manner, whether it's with networking and security, of course, these individual functions will still create that sprawl. What we're representing here is reducing that sprawl, integrating the approach, and allowing all of your visibility, all of your context, policy management, routing, SD-WAN, as well as security, to be all done through a single interface, through a single software platform that's unified across all of your branches, whether that location's in the cloud, on-premise at either a small, large, or even medium-sized location, or even over the headquarters to act as a hub or more of a transport hub-like capability. And this is where we're going to start getting into the concept of security and where the visibility and context actually becomes highly relevant once you begin to simplify the overall infrastructure and the platform architecture and approach to basically transforming the WAN edge. So the elements, for those that may not be familiar with Versa as we move forward here, is there's basically three different components that we actually have. And the overall cloud IP platform, as we've branded it, is basically consists of a WAN Edge function, which is what we call Versa Flex BNF, that can be deployed across a multitude of different locations. So it's a software platform that's deployed at the remote office, HQ, in any kind of cloud, whether it's public or private. And it's deployed on either white box appliances or Versa branded appliances. This is the SD-WAN Edge software. This is our routing engine, as well as our security engine, and as well as our UCP software platform. In conjunction with that, of course, our head-end components to handle management, as well as orchestration of policies and monitoring and event correlation, as well as the SD-WAN controller or the controller element to handle zero-touch provisioning and other types of services. But collectively, all of these are our platform. So we have a WAN Edge component, which is the intelligent software that gets deployed at the edge or in the cloud. And then we have a management construct that handles monitoring, orchestration, analytics, as well as control. The next deep dive into that for you to see. Sorry. So I'm hoping to improve my quality of audio here, apparently, I guess. Again, this talks to our initial problem early on in regards to, obviously, the need for better bandwidth and better app control in order to handle a real-time service such as voice. But as we look at the components of the platform software, you heard me mention Versa Director, FlexBNF, as well as analytics. And Director is our single pane of glass that relates to provisioning, management, as well as monitoring. This is the interface that enterprise IT or even our managed service provider partners leverage in order to configure policies, configure tenancy, use this to manage workflow templates to help automate the overall method of operations configurations. FlexBNF is a cloud-native intelligent software platform that is what is deployed at the edge. This is the workhorse, as we like to kind of coin it, that actually does all the forwarding and all the SD-WAN, traffic conditioning, as well as security enforcement. And analytics is our analytics and search platform that provides that level of event correlation related to the level of context we're able to discover with our SD-WAN routing as well as security software platform. To talk on a couple of different points that we see here on the slide here, from a multi-tenancy piece that you heard Atchison mentioning earlier. This has been designed for both operators on the service provider side as well as enterprise. So from a multi-tenancy perspective, it adds a level of security related to tenancy context. Having a highly multi-tenanted solution to simplify infrastructure or be able to use a common infrastructure for multiple different customers. But from an enterprise angle, it's really about application or workload or line of business segmentation to provide secure segmentation between each of those individual workloads, to put a word to it. And that's what we use for multi-tenancy in regards to the enterprise and across the full stack from the edge to the management, as well as even through analytics. The main thing we like to focus on with our customers, of course, and our partners is that the idea of a software-defined infrastructure with the cloud IP platform is really about managing templates and workflows, and you aren't actually managing the boxes. You're really managing more of an intent to automate an overall configuration or workflow across your overall infrastructure and not actually managing boxes. So a shift from that paradigm from a hardware-driven kind of a strategy, as we saw earlier, to really just viewing things as a software-defined infrastructure. Okay, so now we're going to start getting into this idea about context and policy management, right? So to be a little bit redundant as far as the typical enterprise WAN and branch, most branches are in a legacy or today's world obviously have a multitude of branches that are either connected to some form of private Ethernet service or a VPN service, MPLS or IP VPNs. And then they may have some branches that may have direct or local breakout for internet, but obviously, of course, there's a centralized location for that. In the locations today where there is an internet connection, there's typically some form of analytics, a malware solution, there's a DLP solution, there's a UTM solution, as well as firewall services. And those can either be managed by the enterprise IT or actually offloaded to a managed security service. The main point here is that when we look at a traditional architecture, those points of security and that perimeter, that secure perimeter, is located where internet access is at and over at the centralized location today. So the points of visibility are only at the HQ and data center and those key branches that already have internet access. And so when we look at from a SD-WAN implementation, right? SD-WAN, of course, now bringing in distributed internet to augment existing private line transport or MPLS. You now have a new attack surface that's happening across and is distributed across your entire enterprise WAN. And vanilla SD-WAN, of course, helps to drive a hybrid transport strategy, but there's a level, as we want to talk through three specific points. From a visibility angle, SD-WAN in its vanilla state provides you visibility into network-based policies for applications, but without distributing your security strategy across every internet-connected branch, you don't have a unified visibility capabilities for your web applications for both networking as well as security. And by looking at it from a non-integrated approach, you're also potentially driving a level of complexity for event correlation, meaning you need to correlate your events in your security platforms and then correlate events in your networking platforms, which adds a level of complexity to then figure out and do problem resolution or security event correlation. From control angle, looking at just vanilla SD-WAN providing only transport benefits and optimizations, you don't have unified control for web app security and the SD-WAN. You only have it for SD-WAN in the contexts of application level policies. And depending on the SD-WAN approach or solution, some of the appliances or solutions may not actually give you contextualized control to actually do traffic-based policies. A lot of solutions for certain types of solutions will only do application-oriented policies. So when we talk about context, you're needing to have context associated to who the user is, what is the device that the user is using, where is the user located at, and what are the applications that that user or group of users are needing to have access to. And then associating policy around all those 4 points of context within security as well as SD-WAN simultaneously. And then threat management, of course, we've already touched on this point as far as a distributed internet access increases your overall attack surface, and of course makes the branches a little bit more prone to attack without implementing security at those locations.
Yeah, Robert, I would just also add, on the visibility standpoint, I think there's a question about this as well in terms of visibility and analytics, because we're actually inspecting every single packet with our own DPI engine and observing for performance-related issues, whether that's a MOS score or some other degrading event. And we're doing that in real time, by the way, not just stateful inspection firewall capability, which is probably as obsolete as your legacy MPLS architecture. We're able to actually give you the highest granularity of visibility into performance, security, application intelligence by user, application intelligence across a range of other factors, much like an APM kind of solution would do, whether that's the bit rate of the broadband connection or particular time of day, et cetera. So that's a really important piece for the operator, obviously, to be able to build a service assurance objective around performance and security, high availability, uptime, and application, the quality of user experience in terms of the business critical applications.
Thank you. Critical points that, obviously, Ash, you're mentioning on is when you look at just SD-WAN only, SD-WAN is giving us the context for application to network. And of course, the security piece of it and the ability to do DPI and some other security functions at those locations then helps provide that level of context above and beyond just network and application, but now to user, device, location, as well as the application, and putting those all into some form of a policy strategy. And as we move forward here, we're going to see what are the various different options that you as an enterprise IT architect or operator need to consider when you begin looking at SD-WAN and realizing, of course, that security becomes your security posture has now changed due to either regional internet breakout or local internet breakout and access to it in a distributed fashion across more branches. So when we look at options of how to secure SD-WAN branches, well, let's first talk about traffic paths. So from traffic paths, your traffic paths are as follows. You have a branch-to-branch connection. You have a branch to hub or data center connection. You, of course, have branch to cloud. And of course, you have branch to internet, which requires split tunneling to occur at the local premise, or a branch to colo, right? Say like an Equinix cage that you as an enterprise may actually own or lease. So those are various different traffic path options. And when you look at security deployment options, there's a few options available to you. You can use off-premise security, basically deploying a security service or a function at a hub or within the cloud. You have on-premise based security at the branch, but you're using a separate appliance, vendor, or function strategy as it relates to SD-WAN and security. So these are being managed differently, managed through different tools, and they're separate, they're not integrated. You have on-premise security by actually integrating SD-WAN and security into a single solution. And then you can obviously have firewall as a service, which touches on elements of off-premise based security. So we're going to go into a little bit of each as far as pros and cons, before we get into like a Q&A. So when you get into talking about SD-WAN branches utilizing off-premise security, some of the pros are it's easy to deploy. So this could be something that be offered as a service. Partners such as Zscaler that actually offer security in the cloud as a service. It would be an example of off-premise, or perhaps utilizing a managed security service or security from the cloud, for example, through some of our partners like Verizon that offer that within their DNS offering. The pros of this are it's obviously easy to deploy because it's virtual. It's on demand and it's kind of cloud-like. You have a variety of different managed options, and they're of course delivered usually as a service. So let's talk about some of the cons as it relates to this. So your actual traffic is no longer being inspected from a security perspective on-prem. It's being off-prem now. So in that regard, what's the most important thing to understand and realize is there is no now context as it relates to path optimization. Your traffic is now being punted or sent off-premise from the branch to a different provider or a different cloud or a different location where they're optimize, your intelligence for path optimization may not now be used or leveraged. Certain other features like replication or forward error correction may not actually be effective, simply because now you're moving the inspection to be off-premise. You don't actually have any security as it relates to inbound connectivity to the branch. You don't have security for branch-to-branch connectivity or even branch-to-hub. You now have to have a different strategy for those 2 different or 3 different traffic flows. Management becomes a little bit complex because now you're out of control of it and you don't have a single window, if you will, to look at things networking as well as security related, thus impacting your ability to have visibility into events, thus also impacting your ability to do event correlation. Those are some of the cons at a high level to talk about using off-prem security, although there are obviously, of course, some very valuable pros to it. When we look at branches with on-premise approaches utilizing multi-vendor SD-WAN solutions as well as security offerings. So let's talk about the pros really quickly. You obviously have now on-premise security for both inbound as well as outbound branch traffic. So you can scrub the potential attacks that might be coming in, as well as scrub for any sort of sensitive information going outbound and basically looking for potential things like rootkits and some other potential malwares and viruses that you're seeing. You now have path optimization because you're doing your inspection on the branch, and then service chaining over to a security function, but still being able to leverage path optimization. And then replication as well as FEC then do become a little bit more effective and usable in this sense. So being able to replicate your traffic flows across multiple forms of transport, or obviously doing error correction to potentially help optimize video traffic flows. When you're looking at cons, again, this can be potentially complex because now you're introducing more sprawl into the branch, and thus it can impact deployment costs as well as operation costs. In some cases, depending on the enterprise, you actually might need multiple different security appliances to scrub the traffic inbound as well as outbound. You don't have a unified approach to looking at things as it relates to network policies, network traffic, as well as security policies and security events. And thus that impacts your visibility into the overall entire architecture, again, to do event correlation, which then removes levels of context to understand what's happening in the network as well as security in the security architecture simultaneously. And it's possible that performance could potentially be degraded as a result of the multiple hops that you introduce in order to move all of your traffic flows. And various different services and functions being performed across multiple devices. Now, one of the other approaches, of course, is to integrate SD-WAN as well as security. And what we mean by integrating SD-WAN and security is, example, versus approach, where we have native NG firewall, native UTM capabilities within the same software stack that's delivering routing as well as SD-WAN. So this is not a multiple entity or multi-appliance approach to deliver both of those services. When we talk about some of the pros, obviously, of course, there's now a single appliance, virtual, or a single software platform that you're deploying across your branches. So it becomes a little bit easier, arguably, to operate as well as deploy. You have a single approach to secure all inbound as well as outbound branch traffic. You now, because of a single platform approach to delivering network security as well as networking and SD-WAN, you have a single point of entry for all of your configuration management as well as monitoring, thus giving you a single pane of glass for visibility that's unifying both networking as well as security events into a single console for you. And we can argue that there's better performance because there's less latency, reduced number of hops as it relates between multiple different services or multiple different separate appliances that a packet actually has to traverse and go through. From a cons perspective, depending on the vendor, the cost may actually be a little bit higher as a result of some of the licensing, potentially the underlying hardware appliance to address some of the performance needs to do very CPU or very intensive applications like IPS and some other UTM services. Some vendors may lack certain specific security features than some of our traditional long-standing kind of security vendors that have been out there in the market. And of course, as it relates to compliance or internal compliance and regulations as far as architecture and strategy, there might be a little bit of a misalignment by putting both networking and security into a single software platform that's deployed. So when we've talked about various different options as it relates to off-prem, on-prem, multi-vendor, or an integrated based approach. We've tried to give you examples of pros and cons, and to kind of keep building upon the idea of an integrated approach, of course, from a Versa lens. We want to give an example of how this actually gets deployed. So the first thing for all of us to agree and settle on is that a distributed security deployment is necessary due to a multi-transport strategy that's happening at the branch, aka internet and local breakout. And so when you have within the enterprise head end, or perhaps even being operated by a managed service provider, you have an overall infrastructure that is providing multiple different virtual network services, to be deployed across your distributed WAN edge. And so when we look at that from a single point, we're providing all of these services to be deployed on a single platform. When we look at how does security get deployed in this context, and we'll take a use case around how do you quickly change policy across the entire WAN estate from a single console immediately in order to address something that might be non-compliant with business practices. So we have Acme organization that needs to now set a global security policy that is basically going to block, say, ESPN from being accessed from all of the sites located in their WAN edge. And so from a single console, of course, a policy committee can be implemented and distributed in order to block an application such as ESPN. The point that we want to bring across here is that with a contextually aware software platform, you can actually identify a unified policy that may only block, say, ESPN for a specific set of users on a specific device at specific branches. And that power of context comes from the integrated, having security functions and services integrated into the overall network network platform too as well.
By the way, Robert, one of the cool things that a lot of our customers are doing, again, back to the multi-tenancy everywhere concept, is segmentation of the branch network by class of traffic, as well as segmentation of duties. So you can imagine CXO perhaps doesn't want ESPN blocked on his or her iPad. That's a separate policy that can be established. However, you might want to subordinate a bulk traffic to other, whether it's engineering or sales or marketing, have that segmented as a separate policy that is accessible at certain times a day, or you create a separate policy to offload that traffic, let's say through Zscaler to an internet connection. In some cases, you're segmenting traffic in each branch through that one controller, that one policy, to establish segmentation between things like guest Wi-Fi and the ATM network, for example.
Thank you, Ash. So as we move forward, the other thing we wanted to provide everybody here as it relates to this context of security, policy enforcement, SD-WAN, segmentation, and obviously, of course, attuning to a new branch strategy. We've put together a list of talking points that we can that you can go through and analyze as it relates to what do you need to consider as you move to a new branch strategy, right? So what we're really talking about is what do you need to consider when you're beginning to deploy SD-WAN, looking at direct internet or augmenting your existing MPLS connectivity to a different form of transport, whether it's LTE, broadband, etc. So these are a couple of talking points for you to kind of go through. Of course, a depth of integrated security services and how do you actually approach that? So is the appliance vendor that you're working with have an integrated approach to the security services? Or do they partner up and actually provide services through a third party? And so how does that actually work? What's that relation? And what's the level of functionality you get from security? There are a lot of vendors within that mix that actually provide levels of security, but there are a few vendors that actually provide deep levels of security integrated with the overall SD-WAN solution. We'll actually show you something related to that. What's the control plane security? All right, so what's the control plane security as it means? What's the security construct and the abilities as it relates to the controllers, to the management infrastructure? You now have multi-points of access through non-MPLS based connectivity. How is your control plane protected? These are things you need to consider as it relates to overall branch connectivity and strategy. What's the data plane security? So this ties into the first box that we talked about. How are you designing, and what is your need and requirements to provide security for all different types of traffic paths? So we went through that earlier as it relates to branch to cloud, branch to branch, branch to colo, branch to data center, maybe even branch to partner service. How do you design a security strategy around that, and what are the various different options available to you to address that? You don't want to increase your complexity. You don't want to make it harder for you to manage. So look at ways, and what are the ways for you to provide that unification of configuration management as well as visibility for things networking as well as security oriented. Is that integrated into the management infrastructure of the branch solution that you're analyzing? Do they provide that capability to do advanced security policies in conjunction with network-based policies and SD-WAN policies from a single point of control? Multi-tenancy with RBOC from an operations perspective, but multi-tenancy What's the level of multi-tenancy through the full software stack that helps you provide granular as well as contextualized levels of segmentation between either lines of businesses, between groups of users, between different types of services. The most common ones that you've also heard today would be things like guest Wi-Fi versus corporate business traffic. What's the level of contextualization or contextual awareness and visibility related to applications, users, location, as well as devices? So this example would be, my name is Robert. What is, for Robert, what's the policy for Robert accessing Zoom at his office from his mobile device? What's the level of power to develop contextualized policies and control around that type of context? What's the level of advanced threat protection? What's the strategy as it relates to UCP in order to provide a simpler virtualized strategy for each of your overall branches? And how are you securing your clouds across the board everywhere? Moving to our next slide before we get to Q&A. When we were talking about integrated security, we wanted to highlight one thing. So you have NSS Labs, which provides an approach to validating and verifying security capabilities within a variety of different vendors. You have a couple of security vendors which are very common names that most know about, namely like say Palo Alto or Fortinet. But when you look at this from an integrated SD-WAN and networking approach, Versa Networks up here has been recommended for our NG firewall services. And the thing we wanted to highlight to you in our architecture is that the security service is not a separate product or a separate software platform. It's integrated within the same SD-WAN software platform, routing platform that we deliver to our customers. But one of the things we wanted to highlight and to kind of address, one of the cons that we had mentioned earlier around the lack of security capabilities in certain vendor solutions, and we just wanted to bring light to everyone and then bring to your attention the validation, if you will, from at least an NG firewall capability to Versa Network secure cloud IP architecture. And with that, just to kind of give you guys some landing, some call to actions. You can download our report. You've seen the link coming up in the chat window from our host. If you're curious to understand how all this works, what's the level of contextual visibility you actually get from an integrated approach to the WAN Edge, reach out to us and request a demonstration. We're more than happy to provide you a demo and give you all that awareness into what we can actually do. And obviously reach out to us on social media or email us at our alias of info@versa-networks.com, or you can reach out to me directly at rob@versa-networks.com. With that, Roy, I'd like to just kick it back over to you and the team and start going through some of the Q&A.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Atchison. So let's go ahead. And again, I'd like to ask the audience who've been with us the last hour to go ahead and submit the questions. If you haven't done so via the Q&A little window, if for whatever reason we're not able to get to your question today, what I'd like to encourage you to do is still get those submitted, because the Versa Networks team has kindly agreed to go ahead and answer those questions later on for us, and we'll make the Q&A available via a post on SDxCentral, along with the recording of today's webinars and a copy of today's slides available for download in about a week or so. So go ahead and submit those questions, and so let's get to it and take a look at the list of questions incoming. So, all right, Robert and Atchison, let's see. So, first questions. This pertains to sort of combining SD-WAN and security. So, how many enterprise customers in what you've seen out there in the marketplace? How many enterprise customers have both SD-WAN and security as requirements for the WAN transformation or WAN renewal projects?
Yeah, so this is Atchison. I can take the first part of that. We are unique in the marketplace, obviously, with some very strong go-to-market partners who are tier one service providers and have great visibility across many large global enterprises, as well as having evaluated a number of SD-WAN competitive solutions out there. And by the way, Gartner's now claiming, there's 60 plus vendors. So the only way to really prove and validate some of these points is through, an operator like a CenturyLink or a Verizon or a Comcast. But basically, now we're approaching 600 enterprise installations in about 4 years of commercial availability. We're now seeing that in this year alone, we're seeing that trend about 85% plus, where the requirement is no longer link aggregation, or I want to do an overlay to my IP router, legacy infrastructure, or I want to, play cost arbitrage against MPLS. It's now about how do I make it really, really simple to scale and turn up 1,000 or more sites through one tenant and one management plane, and do that across hundreds of separate clients. And the context between security and WAN performance is undeniable now. So that's a trend that we're now seeing, which clearly validates from the beginning that the founders had, which is start with security services first. If you're an SD-WAN vendor and you're really only concerned with performance and optimal WAN path selection, you don't really care what's inside the packet, then I think in this day and age that is not going to be sufficient.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see. Let's move on. We have a couple other questions to get to. So let's look at it. So I think we talked a little bit about this already, but I think the question still wants a bit more details. We talked about fully integrated security with SD-WAN versus using just an SD-WAN platform that service chains, multiple sort of third-party security VNFs. And I think this question says, what can you reiterate again the couple of advantages that I think Robert did point out during the presentation, but looks like there's still a question around comparing integrated security on SD-WAN versus taking the SD-WAN platform that service chains a bunch of security VNFs. So I don't know, Edge or Robert, who wants to take the question?
I can jump on that real fast. I mean, I think that the main point really is around simplicity. By taking an integrated approach, a single, let's call it an interface to do all things related to networking and security, you minimize the technical integration as well as operational integration that you have to do in order to deploy policy, whether networking and security. There's a level of support associated to having support benefits as it relates to integrating it, instead of having needing support or licensing costs for multiple different services or multiple different vendors or appliances. You can kind of simplify all that from a single integrated approach. From a service chaining perspective, when you're looking at it from that angle and utilizing service SFC within SD-WAN to then move its steered traffic to other functions, security in this context, it touches back on earlier in regards to operational complexity to take that approach. Is the argument, simply because you now have to do technical integration, technical interoperability. If there's software changes, software licensing changes upstream or downstream, there's a level of validation and verification that has to happen to all things within that particular service chain. So there's a level of complexity ongoing for management associated to that approach, as opposed to simplifying it down into one.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate that reiteration of those points and a summary of the differences. All right, let's move on to the next question. Maybe this one talks about, I would say, let's look at the importance of the platform capabilities for service providers. So more so than the enterprises. But let's start with sort of this two-parter. So true multi-tenancy, talked a bit about that in the presentation. You know, what are the advantages of sort of true multi-tenancy to service providers? I think we start with that first, and then secondarily, if you could address it for large global enterprises, sort of two market segments, right? What's the importance of multi-tenancy? Ash or Rob?
So I'll jump in again. So from a multi-tenancy perspective, I think there's two different ways to look at it. If we look at it from a SP infrastructure angle, the ability to the capabilities and benefits of multi-tenancy really talk to infrastructure footprint. By being able to leverage a scalable software-defined platform approach that is highly multi-tenanted from the edge all the way up through the orchestration and management components of the overall platform architecture, helps to reduce the infrastructure footprint by allowing that to be serviced to hundreds or potentially even thousands of customers, depending on the level of scale. That's one benefit from an SP aspect, potentially operationally, as well as integration. So it will help reduce integration costs, and infrastructure costs can potentially be a little bit more efficient. When we look at an enterprise, the value of multi-tenancy is really around, you know, segmenting the various different network segments, right, or business segments. So if we look at, say, a traditional kind of use case we talk about a lot, really is around retail, or maybe a quick serve location. You're really talking about guest wireless services for us as the consumers. You may have digital streaming television services that might be going through the store that might need to be a different segment, closed circuit television. You have point of sale applications that may need to be segmented, potentially HVAC or any other partner managed services. And the tenancy is used and valued to the enterprise by allowing each of those different types of workloads or applications to be segmented from each other securely, and then have unique policies and tunnels or network and security policies associated to each of them, all within the same SD-WAN edge appliance, if you will. So the benefit for tenancy for enterprise around segmentation, one of the benefits for SP is really about infrastructure efficiency.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Moving right along. Taking a look at sort of the next question here. So talking about sort of multi-cloud migration, which is one of the very popular topics today. How effective is secure SD-WAN in terms of multi-cloud migration strategies?
Yeah, I can talk to that one a bit. One of the biggest concerns about legacy WAN infrastructure is the more internet WAN links that you add, the more vulnerable you are to potential exploit. And when you add multiple cloud components to that, distributed data centers in the cloud, that is complicated even more. So with our NFV functions, an operator, for example, it's much easier to inspect every single packet, every single flow, every single conduit back into multiple clouds, whether that's infrastructure as a service to the branch, the physical branch, or infrastructure as a service to co-location, or between different clouds. Our cloud native software is very easily consumed as a VNF in terms of the operator offering diverse circuits, whether that's private line MPLS, ISP cloud, LTE, etc. All of that, all of those links, all of those traffic connections, all of those flows are not only optimized in terms of performance and QoE, but they're also inspected for potential security vulnerabilities all the way from layer 4 to through layer 7. basically in the same, dropped into the same piece of software. That's entirely unique in the marketplace. And, you know, the simplicity and the ease of implementation and management and deployment, reporting back, analytics that take into account the context between performance and security. All of that is available through the secure cloud IP architecture that Versa was built on from the ground up.
Got it. Appreciated that. And actually, there is a related question here, and I think either you or Robert, with regard to some of the multi-clouds and public clouds. That this question specifically is, what does Versa provide at the public cloud edge to increase security and enforce customer security posture? So I think you covered some of that already in the answer you just gave, but I was wondering if you want to maybe expand that answer to address this specific question.
I can take this one. So, I mean, the specific answer to that is that Versa software is deployable in your top 3 cloud providers today. We have images related to that. So whether it's an AMI for Amazon, packages for Microsoft Azure, as well as packages for Google GCP or GCE. What we do there from a public cloud edge, of course, is, as you've listened today, we have integrated capability as it relates to security into our software package. So as those get deployed at the public cloud edge, say in Amazon VPC, that security capability can be turned on, providing native protection above and beyond, say, the cloud-based offer from that public cloud provider, but having that integrated as well as extending the SD-WAN architecture directly up to that cloud edge to your own VPC or your customers' VPCs. So that's kind of what we offer as it relates to increasing security and enforcement, because you're extending the SD-WAN perimeter directly up to that. Talking again, AWS specifically as the example, at the VPC as the VPC kind of gateway point. So you're deploying Versa in that cloud at that edge, using these features, providing protection from, say, public inbound to that cloud, or just in general, maybe transit traffic between that VPC and others that be using it as a gateway. So it's really a matter of where you're deploying it and things of that nature, but the inherent security capabilities deployed in the cloud lend itself to basically help improve the overall security posture you have as it relates to cloud workloads.
Got it. Thank you, Robert. All right, next question here, and I think we'll make this the last one. I know there are still a couple of questions here that we haven't been able to get to, but again, the Versa team has kindly offered to answer those in a blog post after the webinar is over. So let's just go ahead and ask it. So the Versa virtualization service chain seems to be able to allow a customer to virtualize a server, say Microsoft Windows Server. And does it allow it to virtualize a server like a Microsoft Windows Server in the Versa branch device? Sorry, that question is a little configured, a little modified. And finally, can you configure some kind of security to protect that virtualized server? So I think, Robert, you were indicating you're going to answer this one. Go ahead.
Yeah, so what this is really the concept around a UCP software platform. So within Versa, we do have a native and integrated hypervisor that's KVM based within us as the host operating system for the CPE. And as a result of that, we can actually support virtualized services or virtualize other virtual machines, whether they're DNFs or potentially in some contexts or examples, as mentioned in the question, have those be virtualized on top of Versa as the host operating system as a result of our KVM integration. And then within that, because we are the host, we are basically the software UCPE platform at that point, we can actually extend across those virtual connections to those virtual entities, various different security features. So we can, basically do DPI on the virtual links, right, to provide some levels of security capabilities. We can implement firewall capabilities across those virtual links, or even the public transports that those virtual links will be utilizing. Define various policies for each of the individual virtual hosts. So
To summarize, Versa can be the UCB software platform. We support the instantiation of virtual hosts on top of us with us as the host OS. We do have verified and validated VNFs that are within our overall ecosystem that we've done. Other use cases like a Windows server, for example, we can discuss. But however, any virtual host on top of Versa can actually then can benefit from the various different advanced SD-WAN or security capabilities that we have integrated inside of our software platform.
Yeah, and I would just add, one of the benefits to Versa, unlike most of the other competitors in terms of service chaining, is the NFV functions have already been service chained within our architecture, ranging from network security, Wi-Fi capability, SD-WAN, of course, WAN optimization, and even the IP router functions. Those are all NFV functions within the core architecture. We can service chain in third-party applications, whether that's the virtual UTM from Palo Alto Networks, for example, if the customer requirement dictates so. But that's one of the huge advantages of our software, is the fact that it's already completely, fully integrated and service chained within our own fabric, fully programmable. We automate all of those functions, make it very, very easy to consume as a service.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Atchison. And thank you,
Yep.
Robert. So with that, we're at the top of the hour, actually a little beyond. So appreciate the attendees for staying with us the last hour, and hope you found today's presentation helpful, especially with regard to security and the ability of an integrated SD-WAN platform to improve that for the enterprise. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for the time. Again, the recording of today's webinar, along with the slides and the Q&A in written form, will be available on SDxCentral site within the next week or so, and you will get an email when that occurs. So thank you everyone for your time today, and a huge thank you to Robert and Atchison for your time today and your presentation.
Thank you, Roy.
Thanks, Roy. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Have a good day. Cheers.